Hello, what's up? This is Silas, and I'm here with Steven. You can say what's up to everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have a really interesting video ahead. This is going to be our second video covering food. I'm going to be very excited to get into this one.
Yeah, the first one was
Mhm.
on at a tavern, which is more of a French type of restaurant with some
Mhm.
things mixed in there. And this one we're going to be talking about Huertas, which is a Basque-style tapas restaurant located
Mhm.
in the East Village in New York. Stephen, could you tell us about when you first found this place, what you like about the ambiance? Sorry, I was listening to someone who had a playlist on some video games, kept talking about ambiance and that word. I was like, a couple of videos I couldn't listen anymore. Now I'm saying ambiance, but Stephen did just actually talk about the ambiance on Minetta Tavern and part of the reason he took the. Anyway, so can you tell us about the restaurant itself, when you found it, the location, and things like that about it?
Sure, so it's interesting. It was actually a woman that I was dating a few years ago. She picked it out. I used to actually work not too far from where this restaurant is located. It's located on 7th and 1st. I used to work on 7th and Avenue C. Now, this restaurant only opened about 8 or 9 years ago, and I worked in this place probably around that time. So it probably opened when I was leaving that job, but then after I left that job, I didn't hang out in that area as much anymore. But one day, she and I at the time were talking about a place to eat. And she brought up, "Oh, there's this tapas place I like in East Village." I thought, okay, let's check it out. And I thought it was really cool because I'll get into this more as it goes on. But I think the quality of food, the style of food is really interesting, and also the price is great. I mean, it's very great value for what you pay. Happy hour drinks are about $4 each. This foie gras, which we're going to show you, is actually a happy hour price is $3. $3 for a slice of foie gras. You never see that anywhere. So things like that, though, that you get good food, you can get a good amount of food, you don't have to spend that much money. And I like this style of eating because the tapas, the small plates, it's you can try a lot of different things. So it's not yeah, I do love Minetta Tavern, but Minetta Tavern, like I said last time, I get one or two things and I'm too full. Whereas with this, you can try lots of little things, even if you want one piece of each thing, two pieces of something, whatever you want to do. Or you could even get multiple pieces of the same thing, but it allows that flexibility to sort of mix and match as you see fit. Sure.
Yeah, cool, cool. So in this series, we kind of so far it's been Stephen as is a bit of a gastronome, and he's also his profession. He's been involved in the food industry. He's actually had a lot of really good insights on just conversations that we've had about different things, because he's actually been involved in restaurants itself. He's gone further and actually gone to the procurement of foods and shipping and those like more whole scale type of things. And then just from our general inquisitiveness into certain things, he cooks himself. I cook as well, and then we like going into the research and the cultures and the histories about why certain food developed, what's the significance about it, like what are the ingredients being used, what are the different ways that you can work with these things, what are the other ramifications of it. And I think this is going to be part of just the series that we had on conversation. The first conversation series we had was "You Are What You Consume," and that's just talking about in general how we physically literally are, we build up our physical bodies by consuming matter and appropriating those calories and content from the food that we consume and converting it into who we are. And then the food itself is also, we are what you consume. A lot of people and cultures and locations say, oh, this is the cultural food of this area. There's a lot of we aggressives out there going and saying, oh, you're white women, you can't have a Mexican restaurant. But then the same people go to a place in New York City and they're like, oh, this is the most authentic Ecuadorian food that I've had. But you go in the back and it's maybe some chefs from Mexico or something. Where Mexican food is not the same as Ecuadorian food. Like this is kind of thing where if you can actually cook something, I think it says something about the cultures that develop certain foods. And then also when you develop those foods, a lot of people a lot of people travel and they think, oh, when I go to this place, the food that I eat is what they remember a lot about that place. But that food itself might have come from somewhere else, or you don't really understand the reasons that it is. So these are the kind of interesting things that go around in the food. And those were the center of our initial conversations. And with this series, this is the second part, as Stephen mentioned. We've already had that kind of thing where it's just interesting hearing Stephen talking about these foods, the questions that we go back and forth. Sometimes we go into more research into things. And we're going to expand this series. And thank you very much for coming here and listening to this. We're going to expand it in different ways, adding foods that we cook. I'm going to start trying to find different restaurants, different places. But this is a developing series. Bear with us. And just one more question with the whole tapas type of thing. Do you know any history with the tapas, both how it started to be? Why was that a significant thing in the, because it's mostly from Spain, at least when they refer to it in that sense, but it has, of course, expanded to other places that the Spanish Kingdom Empire back in the day moved to. And do you know anything about the recent popularity of it, you being involved in the food industry in the United States of America in general? I think it seems to be something that has kind of spiked up in popularity, this tapas trend. Because if I'm not mistaken, my brother is also rather into this, and he lives in the DC area. And I think I've been to only one tapas restaurant, and that was in the Bethesda, Maryland area where I went to high school and middle school when I was visiting. So any more info that you have on tapas themselves?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of interesting. So as I was sort of getting at, I think the reason this is popular is because it's the idea of sort of mix and match, like the idea of, okay, you don't have to go to a restaurant and just get appetizer, entree, or just an entree and you're full. You can mix and match and try lots of different things. So that's I always think of what I read from Thomas Keller years ago about that's the challenge with if you want to do complicated stuff, the problem is if you put a lot on one plate, the flavors are confusing and they like clash with each other. But then if you do one or two things, it's boring. So that's the reason for tasting menus, or in this case, tapas, is that you get a potent flavor, but it's in a small bite. Then you can move on to something else and then something else. So you get the impact of each first few bites, because the impact of each bite is more, it's stronger than if you were to eat like a whole plate of tapas. It's like you're going to be tired of it partway through. So, but the original reason that I was reading is that in Spain it started in the 19th century where they would offer, well, tapa means top or cover, you could probably tell by the word, and a lot of innkeepers would invite people in. Of course, you'd stay there, but what they would do is they would also offer they wouldn't offer full dishes. They would offer samples of dishes because those were like cheaper and that's what people could afford. So the idea that, okay, you offer small pieces of things and that's something for people to sort of snack on, not a full meal, but you can still get some food in. And this started in Andalusia, by the way. I think that's where Antonio Banderas is from, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, and but then the idea was that originally it was like, well, it used to be things like slices of bread with things on them. I have a few items like that, some of the canned fish, items like that, and then it started expanding to other more in-depth things. So I guess you could argue it's one of those things that it's kind of like, I'm trying to think of another example. It's one of those items that sort of started among the lower classes, then over time sort of expanded. And it became this prestigious thing. People started adding fancier and What's that?
Lobster is a common example that they bring up with this.
Yeah. Well, they said when the Pilgrims landed, lobsters used to walk along the New England beaches. You could just pull them off. But now, I mean, they go into these shipwrecks and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also wanted to mention too.
It was tough.
Sorry, you had something to say?
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so also these tapas are from the Basque region, and for those who don't know, the Basque region, if you picture the southwest corner of France, there's the Pyrenees Mountains. It's the region that touches that. So you'll see some French influence in this food as well. Some seafood as well, because the ocean's not too far away. But this is why they have foie gras and other things, because the region Gascony is a little bit above that, and that's really known for duck. So you can start to see some of that influence creeping in. Whereas if you go southern Spain, you're going to see more North African influence, because obviously where it's located. So you'll see some of those spice blends and other things.
Yeah, and this is one of the few things where there's kind of an arbitrary statement when somebody says things like African or some things like Spanish. It's a difference, because not only were the people moving around, not only is the region, it's mostly, these are more regional, geographical rather than political, social type of things. Okay, maybe it's even more social because of different behaviors and practices. Like a simple example, if you go to India, the cuisine doesn't have a lot of beef in it because a lot of the people are Hindu, so that comes into it, and they have the sacred cow in their religion. So you're not going to find that in there. You go to the Middle East, there's not going to be many Middle Eastern dishes with delicious bacon in it because of certain social considerations. You go to certain places like in I think it's Japan or some places in Southeast Asia where there's a higher level of actual lactose intolerance. Now, that's a physical, biological thing that's going to alter the certain foods and things that they eat. And then, of course, some places just won't have certain foods because those animals or plants just don't exist in that area. But the technique and the usage and the reasoning behind creating that food can also be kept in mind. And then the chef can come in and say, they use this food to get this kind of mouthfeel, or this food had this kind of same flavor profile. And then they say, okay, now that technique has done it so well with this food. Let's take this other ingredient that we know of and do that. Or let's go to this other culture, this other location, who developed a similar food to fit a similar kind of niche that this one did. And if we swap those foods around, maybe those same kind of recipes and things like that can all of a sudden match because there was a same kind of thought process that went through to actually creating the food to begin with. And with this tapas, I think I'm checking here online saying there's something like it's actually an appetizer or snack in Spanish cuisine. Do they have situations where tapas are only served in the more typical Western type of meal where you have the appetizer, the meal, and then the dessert? Or is it this whole idea of having a specific tapas, specifically appetizer restaurant, to me kind of in mind, as you mentioned with the Thomas Keller, these higher level ones, when you think of these more Michelin 2-star, those higher class foods, when you see the meals, it's normally kind of in this appetizer type of things where there's like a small amount of the food. It focuses very much on the ingredients versus having this whole idea where you sit with a plate and you got your starch, you got your meats, you got your veg, and everything kind of together in one plate. There is some kind of aspect in there as well where that seems to be something that was done in higher cuisine or bottom. And do you know if this broke apart from regular or has been just into this whole tapas, this appetizer only thing?
Well, I was going to say it kind of reminds me of the French stuff with like hors d'oeuvres and canapes. Like canapes, you typically have as snacks to pass around, and then you have a meal later. And I've seen this with tapas as well. Like I'm trying to remember if it was a restaurant or is in culinary school or something where you can get tapas, like they have them laid out on trays. You can take pieces, but then they actually have full entrees you can get as well. So sometimes they do that too, depending what they're aiming for. Now, the way this menu is structured, maybe we could post a picture of it, but it's like from lightest to heaviest. So they start off with things like I didn't take a picture because it's kind of pointless, but like olives and pickles. Our first item will be at the top, and then as you go down, it's heavier stuff, and then at the bottom you have like a steak dish, you have the sausage and all that. But even the steak itself is not huge. Like it's not like the stuff I had at Minetta Tavern, the 10-ounce or whatever. It's not like that. It's like maybe 5-6 ounce. So it's like it would be like a smaller steak. So you're technically getting an entree, but the portion will be smaller if you want to look at it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions about this?
Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention too. I think I had mentioned this about Italian food, and I was thinking about how much this applies to Spanish food as well. How I watched that video about Roman cooking, and it's interesting because how much it differed from what we think of as Italian food today. But you have to remember, too, they didn't land in the New World yet. So there were no tomatoes. There was no corn. There were no, I'm trying to think what else, squash, like things like that. And with the Spanish food, I read, too, that went through kind of a similar evolution as well. Because, like, there's a dish in here, octopus with potatoes. Well, again, potatoes came from South America. So it's like if you had an octopus, a Spanish dish that featured octopus in the past, you would not have seen that. So things like that. It was interesting how it sort of evolved over time. And then also the Spanish food obviously influenced the New World stuff as well. Like the dish in New Orleans, jambalaya, is based off of paella. We don't have paella in here, but I thought things like that are kind of interesting. That happened too. But it was, okay, let's copy the paella, but we don't have saffron. Let's just use some seafood that we find in the Gulf of Mexico and make something else out of it, plus local spices, things like that too.
Yeah. I mean, that is interesting. And that's one of the more interesting things. I think we'll continue going into more specific videos probably about certain dishes or certain cultural cuisines. I think there were some interesting ones we had gotten into. And because there was something like, where do you divide? Do people think Roman? Like, when does it end being Roman food to Italian cuisine? And then, as we just mentioned, when you just say Italy, there's so many different regions.
Yeah.
Because now the place that's actually called Rome, which was the name of the whole like Roman culture, because there was a time when it was the Roman culture rather than the Italian culture. And then Italian culture was a different principality, different areas. But then I lived in Italy for a number of years, and it's regional foods. It's like Rome is the Lazio region. And interesting enough, as you mentioned, I didn't know this, that tomatoes hadn't really thought of this, that tomatoes hadn't actually entered until that time. Because Roman cuisine existed, there was a food and cuisine that existed at that time before the Italian food. Because right now, Rome, like one of the main pasta dishes in Rome is a matriciana. And that's a dish that has bacon, chopped onions, minced garlic, and like crushed crushed peppers, and it's one of the more primarily tomato-based sauces. When people think of Italian food, they think of tomato-based sauces. one of the few things that people think of is like the fettuccine alfredo, and I don't think that's even necessarily Italian. I think that was like brought in by somebody else. And I think I went to one of the first restaurants in Rome that served fettuccine, but that was a relatively recent thing because there was a time when that became pomodori, like that's like they call the tomatoes in Italian cuisine, was a primary thing in it. And right now, people focus that on Italian food. People often think of tomato sauce, tomatoes. Even
Yeah.
Italian pizza, people think of the tomato sauce, but then many Italian pizzas don't even have tomato sauce. They have like white sauces or just other things on the
Yeah.
toppings. So it's kind of interesting to think there might be certain things that you might think about certain dishes that are not necessarily that dish. And then how long does it take for things to be included into something until it is no longer that level of cuisine? What defines a cuisine? The people making it, the culture making it, or the foods themselves being cooked? That's kind of something interesting to kind of think of when you're talking about foods. And I think that's something that will be coming up in these conversations that we have.
And also, I think I'd mentioned this too, of what someone in culinary school had said about like what is American food? Can you even really categorize it? Because it's like, you know, the French say they invented chowder, so then is New England clam chowder French in origin? Then there's Yankee pot roast, that's English, and then jambalaya, like I say, that's based off the paella. Now there's this debate with fried chicken about did it come from Scotland or but also West African influence? That's because of the slaves in the South. They prepare, you know, I mean, who knows where, or even they've even made the point that fried chicken today could even be a cross between the two. Like, they didn't have the spice blend in the breading in the Scottish version, but they did have the breading, whereas the West African versions were more battered. So they sort of fused together. So there's things like that. But then would you say fried chicken is fusion food? Not really. So it's, you know, it's like how do you measure all this? Oh.
Why not though? Why not say it's fusion? I mean, I'm looking forward to a time. I mean, we're already a globalized country. Like we're a globalized, not globalized country. We're a globalized world. Like it's Earthling food. It's food that's eaten on Earth. Like some of these distinct differentiations are not as important to me, and they're not as significant. I understand why they might be significant to some people. I can try to empathize, but as I mentioned, where exactly do those lines blur? Like with this whole idea of this small meals, is it a thing that was more natural? Is the whole idea of sitting down having a plate with all these different things on it at once? How often in the past could you really get that many things cooked at once to be sitting there and have the time to sit and eat that meal? Is it actually more of a natural thing to have these plates? So somebody's like, oh, we also have a culture where we had these smaller things and that's what we ate, but we never actually wrote the stuff down. And then they're like, are you guys stealing from tapas? When you go to like a Japanese restaurant, you have the sushi kind of like conveyor belt type of thing where they take the small plates. It's literally here. It's also small plates.
I worked. Well, I was gonna say I worked it. Yeah, I worked in one. We did that. Yeah.
Yeah. So isn't that kind of a similar type of Japanese influenced tapas thing where you're focusing on the actual taste of the actual thing at that time, and you're taking one thing at a time and cleansing the palate between the different dishes? There could be something in there. I don't know.
The other thing I was going to say, I remember when I took French in high school, we were learning about the order the French eat their meals in, and as an American, I thought it was very strange because they'll have things like the soup. They have the hors d'oeuvres, and it's usually like soup or something. Then it's lighter stuff, and then heavier stuff. But they actually have the salad at the end, and then they have dessert. Then they have cheese. And the idea is the salad is supposed to like clean you out or something. But I always thought because I'm used to in this country, you typically have salad first, and then they have cheese after the dessert, and they would have another wine or something with the cheese. In the old days, I guess some people would do cigars as well. But I always just thought like that order was kind of strange to me because I was used to, okay, you have like salad, maybe appetizer, entree, dessert, that's it.
It's kind of interesting, and it might
could be various historical and cultural reasons,
I mean, the soup kind of loosens you up, gets you ready, gets you salivating, gets the juices flowing, as they say. And then you get the entree, maybe, because that's like a heavy thing. So you truly get that to hit your body when you're still truly feeling the hunger. And then maybe like the roughage, the veg. You know how people say, oh, you can bottomless amount of salad, you can just keep eating salad. So there's hardly a time where you feel like, oh, I have no room for salad. If you felt like eating a certain kind of salad, if it looked appetizing, you hardly going to be like, I can't finish this salad. Or I'm not going to try. But there's time where you can feel like a steak, but then it's just too heavy. You literally just can't eat the steak. So I don't know. And then, of course, we've discussed there's some things where we had mentioned he'd only had one dessert from Minetta, and he's gone back and he's had other ones. So we'll come back and talk about that. We're just talking about go to a restaurant. If you feel like dessert, just get dessert. I mean, they normally bring out the dessert menu after you've eaten at certain restaurants, but it's often at the same one. And even if it's not in the same one, you can just ask. You don't have to go to a restaurant and think, I'm at a restaurant, I have to have an appetizer, then the meal, then the dessert. You can go in there and be like, I'm going to order a dessert, a meal, and then the salad. Or you can just like, I'm going to order a dessert and salad, or I'm going to have a salad and so you don't have to do things in a certain way. I think this is just about the different kind of things. And if you have nothing else to say, I think let's get into the many ways that you did do it when you went to Huertas.
We can just jump right in. I mean, there's probably more I could say, but it'll probably come as we go through the dishes. So let's just jump right in.
Excellent. So here we go with the first dish, which is, as we mentioned, this is from Huertas.
Yep.
I'm saying that I might not be putting enough of an accent on it, but
yeah, I struggle to roll my R's. Huertas.
Huertas.
Yeah, I have to like really focus for a second.
I am speaking English, so I'll say it in English way. If I was speaking Spanish, I would try to make sure it's Huertas. Okay, here we go. The first one, anchoa and radish, which is anchovies, radish, and butter on bread.
Yep. So this is very interesting. It's actually a very simple pairing. I mean, you can, we'll put up the picture, but it's just a slice of anchovy, 2 slices of radish and butter. It actually works very well together though, because it's like the butter, which is salted, so there's flavor, there's the spiciness of the radish and the browniness of the anchovy. It all works really well together. I'm generally not a big anchovy person, but they highly recommended this, and I tried it. I thought it worked very well. And there's some people who will even tweak it slightly, like they'll add more radish to it or things like that. I think anchovies and radish, they said, are a common pairing in this region, but the butter, I think, really enhances it too. I mean, I love butter, period, but I think it helps balance out the other flavors. So it's like for example, my father will eat anchovies straight. I can't do that. It's too much for me. But something like this is nice because you feel like a lot of people don't realize is that fat actually kind of mutes flavors, like it suppresses them a little. But I think it works well here because it works with the anchovy. So the anchovy, you don't get the full-on brininess. It mutes it a little, but there's still the impact of flavor. So I think it works very well.
This is interesting because with the anchovy, it's got that. It's probably more of a slimy. Is not the slimy.
It's oily. It's oily, I would say.
Oily. Yeah, that's more of a thing. Because like with the radish, it has a very sharp tart taste, a surprisingly sharp tart taste to radish. If you haven't had the radishes yet themselves, and then the butter, of course, a lot of people, again, we're talking about the similarities of certain things like ice cream. If you have a nice full fat butter like ice cream, buttermilk, full whole milk kind of ice cream type of thing, and then you have a nice fresh whole milk frozen butter. Let's say the ice cream doesn't have the flavor in it, doesn't have the vanilla or any particular flavor. You can really tell how strongly the butter aspect, the buttermilk was, that fat aspect of it makes good ice cream taste like good ice cream. Because literally when I'm doing keto, sometimes I'm doing the ketogenic cycles, I just have, even when I'm off keto, I just squeeze some butter and just take a piece and it just tastes so good, just the butter itself. So this seems like it would be an interesting flavor profile. I can't really recall if I've had anchovies. I think I must have, but I had like sardines and the different kinds of smaller fish and things like that. But what would you say anchovies taste like? I know there was this thing from like Ninja Turtles where you used to like on pizza and things like that. But what do anchovies taste like to you? Like that's
very fishy, very briny. I was not a big fan growing up. The only time I liked them was if you cooked the hell out of them. But at that point, it's like the flavor's really muted. But like I said, I mean, my dad would put them on pizza in like big amounts, and I would eat it. And it's just like it was too much for me. Like I liked it like this. It's like I'm trying to think of. It's a fishy flavor. It's brine, so it's saltier. I'm trying to think of like it's those flavors very strong. So
like pickles.
I mean, there's no vinegar. It's definitely brinier, and there's like a strong fish flavor. Like, I'm trying to think of like, I'm not going to compare it, not salmon, but it's like, it's a very strong mackerel. Well, I mean, it's kind of a similar family. Okay. I'm not really
taste in your mouth, or is it something that normally passes rather?
I mean, it passes, but it's strong. That's the thing, and it's like I said, my dad would eat them straight out of the can. I'm like, I can't do this. It's like, it's way too much for me. That's why I thought this was good because it paired with the other things and balanced out. Our mutual friend Abraham actually orders pizza sometimes with anchovies and red onions. Not really my thing, but if he pays for it, I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, I'm surprised that people don't have in the United States of America have chicken on pizza as often as they do. Like here in Kenya,
Yeah.
chicken on pizza is a common thing, but fish on pizza, I guess it's not that's not common here. I would think kind of interesting to do like tilapia. Here they have this thing called omena. I'm not quite sure exactly what fish this omena is. I'll try to look online and see if I
Sure.
can get it. But I think I can imagine some pretty decent dishes with omena because the way omena is normally cooked is normally in a more like thicker stew with tomatoes and some oils and some onions. It's normally cooked longer, so it kind of reduces and has a very strong taste to it. But the fish itself, when you buy them, it's just these little fingerling type of things that are dried out. So I was thinking there'd probably a way to prep it in that way and then put it on pizza because I think that'd be good. I think another good local pizza I could probably try doing would be like a gizzard-based pizza with something. Yeah,
Mm.
okay, getting some ideas. That's also why I like these conversations. We got gizzard pizza, gizzard and omena pizza with these local mushrooms. Could try that. That could be a really good flavor profile with those things,
I
man.
love mushrooms. There's a mushroom dish in here too. I mean, I think I could eat most mushrooms, honestly. I mean, obviously the edible ones, not the crazier ones, but
Okay, so with this one, I was thinking that's also into the butter, just the different mouthfeels.
yep.
There's some of these terms we're going to be using that are sometimes I think might come off a bit pretentious, especially when I'm watching food things, but that is an actual thing. Like, there's a reason that foods are the way they are, rather than just getting this food, putting it in like a puree machine, pureeing it, and just giving it to you as just a glob of mass. Like there actually is something that like, does. It's actually even something like I think I was watching something on why crispy food actually appeals to it. There's something about the crispy crust and then the softness in the inside and the warmth, and depending on what you is it actually there's things that appeal to you in a certain way. So with something like this, with the butter, that the creaminess of the butter, and then the oiliness of the fish, and then the tart, thin slices of the radish, and then what sort of bread is this? What's going to go? So you have on the toast, you can have that crunchiness. Is this like a softer bread? Is it an open crumb bread? Like what kind of
Well,
bread?
it's So just to comment on that, I would say the bread itself is a little bit softer. It's kind of like a baguette style bread. The radishes are fresh though. Every place I've worked in, they're very insistent on you slice the radishes fresh, use them right away. Because if you let the radishes, you're supposed to let sit in water. The slices you put them in water so they don't dry out. But the thing is, if they sit in water, they get soggy over time. So the idea is you slice what you need for the day, you use them up, put them on the plates, and then if there's a little bit left, you throw it away. But you're supposed to do them fresh daily because they stay crisp and fresh that way. Whereas again, if they sit in water, they deteriorate. They sit outside, they're just going to dry out. So there's like the radishes are a little bit of a crunch. There's the butter, and then the bread is on the softer side. Some of the other stuff below that we're going to talk about, the bread is toasted, but this bread is softer.
Okay.
Uh, uh,
Cool. And these ones, are you supposed to? Is it advised? Is this like a 2 bite thing? It's a single bite thing.
Either or, I usually do like two.
Okay.
You just get
Okay.
everything together.
Cool. Cool. So if you're ready, we can go on to the next one.
Sure. One thing I just wanted to mention, the one thing I didn't post is you can order a side of olives and pickles. I didn't bother to post because it's not really that interesting, but they do have some interesting olives. I noticed the different types of olives, the size, the brine varies a little bit, and the pickles they're similar to the cornichon, the French pickles, kind of more on the sour side. Again, I didn't really feel the need to post a picture because it's like, it's not much to look at or talk about,
It's
but
like a
just thought
side, it's like the bread that comes in certain
yeah,
restaurants.
basically. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Um, okay. So
So the
next
next
dish,
one.
marinated fennel.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So here's a marinated fennel, which is goat cheese with fennel fronds on top.
Sure. So it's fennel. By the way it tasted, I didn't ask what was in the marinade, but I'm sensing probably a little bit of vinegar. There was a little bit of acidity, sugar, salt really enhances the flavor, and you simmer it you probably simmer it in a pot on the stove. That's why it turns brown like that. The goat cheese is spread over the toast. This bread was crunchy. Then there's a fennel frond that is the green up on top. So the idea is you use the whole fennel. It's common for a lot of places. They use the bulb. You cut that up and you can either blanch it, saute it, do other things. Then the frond you just use like a garnish on top because it's delicate, but it still has the same flavor.
All right. So this is wait, like, hmm. And what is it marinated in
Well,
again?
that's what I was saying. I didn't ask, but I think it's probably a little bit of vinegar. There's probably sugar, some salt, things to enhance the flavor generally, and then it's cooked on the stove so it turns brown like that. Yeah.
Okay. Just boiled?
My sense would probably be sautéed like in a rondo, like the big round pot.
Okay, and this another
So you get,
looks like another 1-2 bite thing.
yep, same thing.
Huh. Yeah, fennel to me is one of the underrated herbs that's commonly available that I don't think a lot of people. Well, maybe they do. I don't know. But I just think it's somewhat of an underrated herb. Anything okay with the goat cheese? They don't used to say goat cheese. I mean, there's like, like with the milk cheeses, most of the milk-based cheeses is all these different kinds of cheese. They don't
Yeah,
normally just say goat cheese, but there normally is a kind of expectation that goat cheese is more of that. I'm trying to think
like a
of.
chev.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's more like
Just-
a blue cheese consistency, right? A bit softer than that, a bit milkier than that, right?
Well, that's the chev. It's the French. It's typically softer, creamier.
Yeah,
You can typically, it usually comes in like a log, and you usually soften it up, and you can spread it. Or what some people will do is they'll even mix it with other things so it gets really soft, then put it on as a spread. You could do that too. Um, One place I worked, I'm trying to think what we did. I think we melted it down, but then added like we added creme fraiche to it, and then that like makes it thinner so it's spreadable, but it still has most of the flavor. Because creme fraiche, for those who don't know, it's similar to sour cream in terms of flavor profile, a little milder, but like kind of in that direction. So the idea is that thins it out so you can spread it, but at the same time it doesn't alter the flavor too much, something like that. I um I was showing a friend a dish I had from a place I used to work at, Seasonal, the Austrian place, now closed, unfortunately. We actually had there's a device called a Thermomix. It's similar to a RoboCoo, but the blades actually heat up so you can control the temperature. What we did was we put goat cheese, beet juice reduction, and creme fraiche and actually blended it together, and it actually melted it down. So it was this like pink sort of like pourable liquid, maybe. I'm trying to think like about as thick as heavy cream or so, maybe a little thicker. There was also a thickening agent we put in there. I think it was a seaweed based thing. I forget which one off the top of my head. But then what we would do is pour that into molds and it would solidify. So I can send you a picture later, but basically what it is it was a goat cheese, creme fraiche, beet flavored log, and then we would actually roll that in dusted pumpkin seeds and put that on the plate. So you had goat cheese, beets, creme fraiche, a touch of salt, and pumpkin seeds all together. So things like that I thought were really interesting.
that sounds rather interesting. And
Yeah.
this is just something you guys were just y'all were just making in the back, guys, girls, and everything else in between.
Well, this was a dish. I'll send you the picture on the later because this was another restaurant, but this was actually a dish on the menu that we made.
Okay.
This was the goat cheese because I guess the owners were big on they wanted a beet salad with goat cheese, but my chef was trying to figure out like more creative ways to do it because everyone just does like sliced beets with goat cheese and that's boring. So he was trying to figure out like what are more creative things we can do, and that's what he came up with at one point.
That is one of the things. I mean, I was talking to my sister about this, about some other topic, but this came up how sometimes with some of these foods, like you really get to appreciate how people make certain foods or this preparation things, the more you know about it. Like the more, once you know how to make lasagna, you can really appreciate when you go and you get a good lasagna because you understand the effort and time and the ingredients that go into actually making the thing. Even these smaller things, once you understand somebody has tested these different things and come together, then you can also appreciate the people who actually go in there. And it's just different processes to do different things. Like a simple thing is like once you appreciate what cheese is, you understand there is something about the milk itself that has different things that can make the cheese. So now can you swap out that cow's milk for many different kinds of milks? Like, for example, one of the few things with cheese that's related to me is I don't know if I forgot the kind of cheese or we never really had the mozzarella in that kind of sense when I was a kid in France and I left there and when I was 5, then we came to Kenya and there wasn't that much cheese until I got back to the United States of America when I was around 10, 11. And then it was mozzarella cheese. And most of the mozzarella cheese in the United States of America is a string cheese. And then once I left, even when you get it on pizza, it's like the grated one, like the harder. Sometimes it's very lightweight, but normally there's some yellowish to it. And then I finally got back to Italy, or got to Italy, and then back to Europe. Got to Italy when I was past it was already ending college, and I found bufala mozzarella,
Hmm.
and oh, it's a magnificent cheese, and
I
even
agree.
going further, the
I
burrata. The burrata is the one where it's like the buffalo mozzarella, this little kind of looks like slimes from like role playing games. Some but it's just like the white
Yeah.
little thing, and then with the buffalo mozzarella, they have the sack of the outside, but then inside they have slices of the buffalo mozzarella and then some heavy cream in it. And Oh, it's magnificent. But that's the mozzarella cheese in that kind of sense. But that's normally made. It's called buffalo because it's normally made with milk from water buffaloes.
Hmm.
So you have mozzarella cheese. In America, the mozzarella, they say, it's not normally the actual mozzarella that they have in Italy, but it's
Nope.
used in Italian foods and pizzas and other kind of cuisine and things like that. Then you get to Italy, and it's parts of Italian cuisine, and different regions have the different types, but it's from a water buffalo, which is not an animal that's actually that's not actually regional to Italy. Water buffaloes don't really exist in Europe. So they actually had a situation where they found the water buffaloes in Africa, and I think there's water buffaloes in Asia too. So I'm not quite sure. I'll double check and see if they got them from Asia or if they got them from um, from Africa. But now they actually have water buffalo farms in Italy specifically for making, primarily for making that. And knowing the Italians, I'm sure they've also added aspects of finding water buffalo steaks for the ones that are done with their process or the male of the animals. But yeah, so this is an interesting thing to see with that in the background and testing out different things. And if you know anything to do with cooking, go in there, try to understand the way things are made, and switch those things out. Because I'm wondering, could you make like a halloumi version, which is, for those who don't know, is it's magnificent cheese that you can grill and fry, and it has a very high melting point, and it maintains the consistency. So I'm wondering, can you make a halloumi based off of goat milk or cow milk, or does it have to have a certain level of milk fat, or what's it? Does this? So it's not just a lactose. There's something else in milks as well that's particular to what milk is. But yeah, I'm wondering, can you use the same process to make halloumi that's used with milk from cows to do with goat milk? Can you make like a gorgonzola with milk from other animals? Like, can you use like, this is where it goes into like the whole like almond milk type of things where it's this juice, really, it's nut juice. Can you make a gorgonzola based off of coconut milk?
Well, okay, so a few things to say on this. So, blue cheese, for those who don't know, it's the same bacteria, but it's applied to different the milk of different animals, and it's aged differently. Like I know with Roquefort, for example, there's a very interesting process where they actually age it in cliffs by the sea, and then the sea air blowing in is what cures it, or ages it. I guess maybe curing isn't the right word. And I know, of course, Stilton is the famous English cheese, but then like Roquefort, it's made from sheep. Some of these others are made from cow. I do know with the different animals, the issue is the flavor profile is different. Like especially if you have sheep milk versus cow milk, you'll taste a difference for sure. But
Yeah.
also the fat content will be different, so that'll affect the melting point because that's okay. The protein versus fat ratio and how that affects when heat hits it, how it ages. Even the different blue cheeses you'll notice are different in texture. Like the Stilton is pretty firm, if I recall. Some of these others, like the Gorgonzola, is a little more crumbly. So again, that relates to the milk that the animal's from and how the bacteria interacts with it. So there's things like that. Like I think you could try and duplicate the process, but you might have to alter it a little bit, and the end product probably wouldn't be the same. That'd be my guess anyway.
Huh. And that's what they do with some of these things, with these now ketogenic and these different kind of diets and people going into different gastronomy. And maybe we'll do a separate one of that where there's some chefs, I think you've mentioned this in a previous conversation, that are going into really high level gastronomy using all kinds of machines and adding different kinds of things together,
Yeah.
where a lot of the times you have like these keto based things where they have artificial sweeteners, or they'll be able to find ways to say, okay, there's the milk fat, there's the lactose, there's all these other things that come together to make milk. They'll be able to break that down to different chemicals, the different properties of it, and then find some way to add whatever would match the fats. Because with the keto thing, of course, you can have as many fats as you want. So I'm thinking, if the coconut milk doesn't have sufficient amount of fats, although coconut milk is rather fatty compared to the other non-dairy based milks, there's probably ways you can just add dairy based. You can add like ghee has the milk fat removed out, so you probably won't want to use ghee. But there's probably going to be ways you can add something to actually try to match that. But maybe that thing won't necessarily be able to bond with the coconut milk in the way that the fat is bonded into naturally occurring milk. But there'll be ways soon to kind of do the whole replicator type of thing from Star Trek, sorry, where it's just, because all these things are literally just chemicals. Like those chemicals are broken down, and then those chemicals from that cheese come together and make your nails, make your hair, make your skin. So there's ways to break those down and rebuild them into something else, just like the cattle themselves took those chemicals from plants and broke those down and built something else, just like the plants themselves took those chemicals from the soil and the photosynthesis came down and they broke those down in their body and then made the actual plant. So that's all the kind of the cycle of life, the circle of cycle.
Circle of life.
Yeah, there's also like cycle. Yeah, so that's this is part of what we are in. Yeah.
So a few comments I had on that. That's why you see these different thickening agents are big in recent times. Like there's agar that makes something thicker. There's guar gum. There's Versa Whip, which you put into things to make them into foams, so you can play around with the texture and you can make thicker versus lighter foams. An example of sort of what you're getting at, I thought of with panna cotta. I think I have a panna cotta in my photos somewhere, a certain place I went. And for those that don't know, panna cotta means cooked cream in Italian. And what I was learning was that the way panna cotta was originally made was that the cream would be mixed and everything, and it would be allowed to settle, and it would sort of curdle, and that was actually how it thickened. But it's because they used raw milk, that's how that was able to function. But because now milk has been so processed, that effect isn't the same, so that's why they put gelatin in now, so it achieves that same texture, but it's not from the milk naturally curdling as it used to. But again, as I touched on in I think the last conversation, all these restrictions with raw milk and everything, it's hard to do that in the States, at least currently.
Yeah. That's why you see some of these food stuffs have just many ingredients in it. It's this.
Yeah.
To me, I'm wondering, it's like, why go through all this trouble to get something that you can just plant and grow? And maybe just the time, cost, benefit analyses. I'm also thinking there's other processes in manufacturing industries, both like medicines and other things that's not necessarily food related, that create all these other ingredients that then can be used for food in different ways. Or it's like, oh, we need a batch of 100 parts of this, 100 parts of this other thing, and 200 parts of this other thing in order to make this medicine or something. This is just something going off my head. I haven't researched this, could be entirely wrong. But then to make 100 parts of this thing, it's probably the same cost, or there's some processes to make 100 parts of this one thing that also create 300 parts of this other thing that's not necessarily as needed fully. So during that process, you're like, okay, we have this stuff sitting around. Okay, let's find some way to use it in the food industry, and then you do that kind of thing. There's some of those things that I think do come into these kind of considerations that make me wonder.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. One last thing, we mentioned the buffalo mozzarella. I decided to go and check. And it's saying that the buffalo might have been introduced into Italy in Roman times during the barbarian invasions of the Italian peninsula. So at this point, the actual water buffalo that's being used is the Italian Mediterranean buffalo, Buffalo Mediterranean Italiana, and that is now considered to be one that is indigenous breed to Italy. So that was indigenous to Italy, but wasn't indigenous to Rome, just like you mentioned earlier, how the tomatoes themselves came in. So maybe tomatoes and the buffaloes came in carrying a bunch of tomato plants. That was introduced to like the pre-Italy Rome, and then now that became part of it. And then now Italy itself will also have many indigenous strains of tomatoes, because there's now cultivars, as you mentioned, with the wind coming off of the oceans. Some of these places literally can only grow like some Roquefort, some types of cheeses are specifically that way because of inherent qualities of the actual geology in the area, geographical, like specific things about certain areas that's the only thing that can somehow develop this. Now, these are well-guarded secrets to some people, but I'm sure there's going to be ways to also with that, find ways to duplicate that, whether it's finding ways to carry those same plants and soil to different areas and then creating them again in a different place, or it's a situation of finding out what the actual chemical reactions are that go on to change these foods into a certain way and react in a certain way, and then being able to actually also simulate those in a more artificial sense. These are things that can be done, and I'm looking forward to the future where I do appreciate the taste and things. I empathize a bit with the people who want to preserve it to be a certain locational thing, but for me, we're all earthlings. This is earth food. We're going to go further, and like, let's share these things. In my estimation, from my lived experience, sharing and exchanging these information, these cuisines, these ideas has resulted in better, more of valuation of those ideas and things, rather than just keeping them to these secluded areas.
Yeah, I agree. All right.
Okay, so next one.
Sure.
All right, the next one is goat cheese stuffed piquillo pepper on toast. Is it
Sure.
Piquillo?
Piquillo. So piquillo, it's a type of pepper. It's on the sweeter side. Piquillo in Spanish actually means little beak. So if you're familiar in Mexican food, there's something pico de gallo, which means rooster's beak, and that typically comes with chips. So this is piquillo again. It's the little beak basically. So it's the shape of the pepper. It's a little red pepper. It's on the sweeter side. It's fitting on this little piece of the bread. Again, I'm not sure if it's baguette exactly, but it's similar to that. So you can tell the whole pepper bit almost fits on the toast. So it's a pretty small pepper. Sweeter side, it's charred, likely with a blowtorch. There's goat cheese inside. So they put the goat cheese in, just lightly sear the outside. So when you bite it, there's the little bit of sweetness. There's the char from the pepper. There's the cheese is creamier, and then the toast, it's crunchy. So
is the goat cheese normally served at room temperature, or is it normally chilled?
it's a little warm. It's not it's funny. It's actually a little messy. I was sitting next to a guy there yesterday who actually bit into it and it sprayed all over him. So it's like it is pretty soft because they like my sense here is that they blowtorch it with the cheese inside, but it's not running everywhere. It's softer, but it's not like watery.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I would have thought this would be more like maybe a salumi or something. It looked a bit like a salami, like with the different colors on top of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right. I don't know. I don't really have any more questions about this one specific. But yeah.
We'll do, and then there's another place.
Is it a house? What's the Schofield? Is it Schofield level to the pepper?
Scoville units.
Scoville units. Yeah, is this a hot?
No, this is sweeter actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because people should understand, like the peppers, it covers everything. So it covers even things like the bell peppers and things like that have Scoville, but it's just like very low. It's almost non-existent. Does it even chart on the thing? But the chart covers all the peppers, right?
Yeah, like poblano or something would be very low, and then something like ghost chili or Trinidad scorpion would be at the top. Yeah.
And with these chilies, some of the things that are being developed, again, this is another thing. If someone is like, oh, we're just going to keep the chilies in one location, and these are the only ones, and the whole naturally occurring ones are nowhere as close to as potent as the ones that people have, these cultivars that people have selected and chosen and just tried to make this monster peppers. Like I just remember, I personally have I really like spicier foods. I have a rather high threshold when it comes to this. Not anywhere close to as high as the people you out there who go hunting these things down and competing with them, but it's higher than average, I would say, from just seeing what other people eat around me. And I tried to make a home paste. I made a pretty decent home paste chili sauce. Like we had some Scotch bonnet peppers and got a whole bunch of them. We had harvested a whole bunch of them from just one plant. It's just been very fruitful. And technically, these are fruits. Yeah, technically, peppers are fruits. But try to make that. Used a small little pot. And when I was making it, I was reminded, you get a very clear reminder of how pepper spray is called pepper spray for a reason, because it actually is derived from peppers, because just the fumes that come off of it. So I had to open up all the windows in the kitchen. Next time I make this, I will make sure to make it outside when I have the coal burner, charcoal burner, so you can have it in the outdoors. But then after cooking it, I didn't make the decision. I should have made the decision better. I washed the little saucepan that I used for it. Thought I washed it pretty well, but the next few days later, I think it was 2 days later, someone else in the household ended up going down there and cooking, and then just that flavor somehow went and stuck into the pot. So you have to really scour the pot and make sure. Possibly the best way to do it would also be to, once you finish done, do the first washing, boil some water into it, wash it again, maybe boil again and wash it again. That should get the stuff out. But peppers are a fun thing for me. What's your preference on spicy hot peppers?
So I tend to like milder stuff. I just looked up the Scoville scale just to sort of finish that point. So the Piquillo is 500 to 1,000 on the scale. The bottom is 0. So like a bell pepper is 0. Peperoncino is 100 to 500. Anaheim is 500 to 2,500. I'm not going to read through all of them, but Scotch bonnet is 100,000 to 350,000. The top is Carolina Reaper. That's 1,400,000 to 2,200,000. So this is definitely on the bottom end. Like you figure this would be about a pepperoncino. Those are those Italian pickled peppers that are a little spicy. This is like kind of in that range. The ones here I didn't think were that spicy. Like you can pick up a little bit, but it's not really pronounced. I like poblanos because it's like they're a little bigger, so you can do stuffed peppers with those. But like I feel there's enough heat where it sort of balances out. Like it gives it a little bit of kick, but the whole thing doesn't just taste like hot pepper. Um, some of these other things I'm trying to think, like habanero. I mean, I like chipotle because I like the smoky flavor with the spice.
Yeah.
That's kind of good. I don't like stuff that's over the top. I mean, some people do. I don't really see the appeal. I mean, I'm not used to it, and it's like I'm not going to
Yeah.
just burn my mouth because it's like
Yes.
you
I want to be pleasurable, not painful. I'm not looking for pain in my food. I'm not like an sadomasochist when it comes to
yeah,
anything really. It's definitely not food.
yeah.
Maybe in the level like working out sometimes you get a really good workout and you feel the pain after and like, okay, that's worthwhile. But not when it comes to food. Where I remember like, I don't know if people were missaying, they were saying it was habaneros instead of jalapenos. Because I remember people used to state that jalapenos were like hot, but they're really not. That's the common one that you found only like pickled sometimes in when you order pizzas or in restaurants in the United States of America. That's a common one to find. And for some reason, I feel like that was hotter when I was much younger, when I was in my teens, and how I've met it. Maybe it's just my palate has just changed. Because when I come across jalapenos now, they're just not normally that hot.
No, it's I mean, if you look at it, we could even include the Scoville chart if anyone's interested, but they're not. I mean, they're not at the bottom, but they're maybe like a few steps up. So they're not the mildest pepper, but there's definitely stuff that's a lot hotter too. So again, I guess it depends what you're used to. I mean, I've worked with people from Latin America who will put jalapenos on everything, so they're used to it. But for somebody like me who eats it once in a while, it's like a little bit here and there is good. But I don't eat so much spicy food that, for me, it's like that little bit is good. I don't need that much.
And there's probably an aspect on the processing of some of these where they just gone and it's one of those how they make it channels where I saw where they're factoring the bottled habaneros. It's not just the process of actually processing it down so you have a normal base flavor across, but they even select it at the level of selecting the plants. They find a specific plant where you're not going to have a fluctuation. Just like if you have more organic fruits that are not really selected to the level as some are, you'll have a different flavor. Like you get a mango, it's going to have a different flavor profile, even from the same tree, depending on how much nutrients it got, how much sun it got. You'll have some that might be more tart, some that might be sweeter. Of this, maybe even come down the same branch. I'm not quite sure how close this gets. But then when you have these situations where you have a controlled kind of farming situation, they've gotten it down broken where they could probably say like all these plants from these strain of plants are only limited to whatever happens on the Scoville scale. And this Scoville scale, what's with those numbers? Why it gets up like a billion? It's like exponential growth as you go up. How do they count these things?
I'm not actually sure because we learned in school that it's measured based on it's just how hot the peppers are. There's the Scoville scale, there's capsaicin units. I know the
Okay.
capsaicin is found in the seeds, but I'm trying to think of how they measure that. I don't know. I'm not actually sure. I mean, I feel like I should know this now, but it's not something I gave much thought. Yeah. It's more of a good warning thing. Like, okay, if you want to try this pepper, know what you're getting into versus, okay, if you like something like this, maybe it's about the same, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to the next one.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. So here we have Lomo, which is
Yep.
cured pork loin on toast.
Yep.
And the first one has apricot and
Yep.
the second one has apple. So there's going to be two
Sure.
different ones. And you can clearly see the apple one when I put that up on the screen. Yeah.
Sure. So it's actually tenderloin. I wrote loin. I meant tenderloin. It's cured. It's either it's typically salted or brined, and then
Tenderloin?
oh yeah, tenderloin of the pork.
Cured
So
pork tenderloin.
yeah, I wrote loin. I meant to write tenderloin, but it's um it's salted or brined, then cured or smoked, and then they cut it really thin. It dries out a lot. Like think of like prosciutto or something, but prosciutto is the leg. Obviously, this is the tenderloin. So then you slice it very thin, as you can see in the picture here. And then they pair it with the fruit changes on the season. So lately it's apricot. When I had it a while back, it was apple. They change it based on the season, but it's one of those things that I think they have year round. It's kind of like I guess an Italian place serving prosciutto, but then doing like melon one season, then maybe like apple another or something like that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
These are one of those things where there's some certain staple foods that you find are very typical. This one probably just came. It's the prosciutto it's a dried. It's a process of making things. So this is something that you will find. You probably find, as you mentioned, something really similar in Italian restaurants. This was a common thing. Was that they'd serve this with like the buffalo mozzarella as an aperitivo. Normally with some bread, and then you have some olive oil and ground black pepper. That was a common aperitivo that you'd find in all the regions that I went to in Italy, and maybe starting one Arab at one. But it's dried meat and bread and some fruit. Like this is a staple thing. So some of these foods are it's like, oh, this is Spanish cuisine. Is this Spanish cuisine? Or is this human cuisine? Like this is something that's rather typical and straightforward. And this is another kind of thing where, like, yes, the cured pork tenderloin, you can find different animals have more of a. You find different animals with different parts of the animal that have different kind of fat to meat ratio as the pork tenderloin, and then you could probably use that same exact process to get something in this same kind of taste or intention. It might not be exactly the same. Like for me, I'm really a fan of goat meat, but goat tends to be a much leaner animal, especially when you come to the free range, the way most of the goats you find here in Kenya are. There might be some ways to capen them up or to farm them to fatten up the animal and things like that. That might, I don't know if that will. See, at the same point, when I have most of the goat that you get here is grass fed, so there's a definite, distinct, strong flavor profile to it. And then if you change that, that's going to might affect the flavor profile and things like that. So these are the considerations to have. There might be something you can just add to the goat's grass diet to get them a bit thicker, or work them out a bit more to get certain cuts that you get from cows, you just can't get from goats. So that could be just something interesting. But yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, cured meats, it's like there's so many things you could do. I remember looking at a chart in culinary school about Italy alone and how many things they have. So prosciutto, I mean, there's two major versions of that, prosciutto di Parma, prosciutto San Daniele. The di Parma is nuttier, the San Daniele is sweeter. That's from using the upper leg of the pork. But then with this, it's a tenderloin. So again, that's along the back. If you're eating beef, that's where you get filet mignon. And then there's something like capicola in Italy, but that's actually the neck muscle of the pig. But then they put that into like a mold, I'm trying to think like a case. I don't know what the word for it is. Cured, but it's a similar thing. You cure it, then you slice it thin as well. So different parts of the animal, different curing process. Like as you mentioned yourself, the fat content's a bit different aging times depending on how big the cut of meat is, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a lot of different things you could do. So,
Good,
yeah.
good. Yeah. All right. Anything else you have to say about this?
That's all.
Did you have a preference? Did you have these at the same time, or these are from two different times?
No, they're different times. The apple, I think I had a while back when I first came, and then the apricot I had more recently.
Okay, so as you mentioned on the menu, it's normally going to be one of the fruits at the time when you actually go to it.
Yeah, within season, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the next one. This is Boquerones, which is fresh anchovies marinated in olive oil and vinegar, served with olives and a pickled pepper.
Sure. All right, so these are, I would definitely say milder than the ones out of the can from up above, because the ones out of a can are brined and they sit in oil for some time. So that flavor gets very strong and concentrated. Whereas these, because it's fresh fish, it's a bit milder. I mean, obviously it does taste like olive oil and vinegar as well, but they're definitely milder. I found these to be a little more pleasant, and then the brininess of the fish itself is not as briny, so it works with the olives because the olives have brine, and then the pepper, it's pickled, so it's a little spicy, but there's vinegar too, so the flavors really come together.
Yeah, this seems like it would be more for the people who like the tart, salty type of things.
I'd say spicy, briny, a little bit of acid from the vinegar. I guess that's what I'd say. Yep.
Yeah, I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of olive oil. I'm not a fan of olives themselves.
Oh, really?
I normally pick them off of pizza and things like that. And if somebody happened to order something with them on it, and I'm having a slice, it's. This is different because it's not like I actually get. It's just a taste I just don't really find appealing. It's like pasty. It seems to have. I don't know. It's odd. It's oddness. Some of these things I wonder, like, how do they find out that you can make oils out of certain plants and animals and things like that? What's the process of actually?
I just thought of something really morbid. An animal got trapped in a press or something, and they figured.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, but like with the fruits, I guess maybe you just taste it or you smash it or there was something. It's just kind of, it's probably just certain things that people observed from different things that weren't there, and then you got to a point, or as you mentioned with the other processes, when you're making something else And in your process of making something else, something is left over that you're like, hey, maybe if we take this to another step, and that's just the ingenuity that we have. And that's just
Yeah, well, I was thinking to myself with olives, it could have been maybe like some were flattened or something, and they saw it
yeah.
was seeping out, and they figured out, well, if we do this on a large scale, okay, we have bottles of it, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's one specific food I think somewhere in Scandinavia where it's just literally just fermented fish. It's like food that's gotten
Yeah.
rotten. But then like that kind of situation is probably there's probably someone who was in a situation where they hadn't had an accurate store of food and there was like a long winter and they couldn't get anything else and they were eating whatever they had there and then somehow
Yeah.
they found out that it's like fisk or something like that it's called, which I think is just whatever language word that is for fish. but it's like some marinated thing where it's literally just we're going to let this rot in a controlled condition, and that's some delicacy in the place. It's weird how some of these things come to me. But it's an interesting plate he's using here. It looks like like a almost like a hand thrown.
Yeah, Netta, we actually had that. Netta, we actually had the same plate. We'd put soy sauce and other things in it. It looks very nice because the bottom is just like deep blue. So if it's a sauce you can see through, it looks really nice too because you can see the bottom. So
yeah, like I've done some ceramics, and this looks like something that was like raku fired, which is like something where you throw in, but it's probably not raku fired. It was probably actually done in an actual process where to make it look like it's more hand thrown. I don't know. Okay, so next one.
Sure.
Oh yeah. So here we have some croissant sandwiches. So the first one is going to be a manchego. It features manchego and serrano ham. And manchego is sheep cheese made from the manchega breed of sheep in the Mancha region, not a manch in there. And serrano is a ham typically made from white pigs, usually the landrace pig breed or the supremacist pig breed, according to. And the other sandwich, the next one will be featuring chicken liver mousse. Is it mousse? What is it, mousse?
It's mousse.
Okay,
Mousse.
chicken liver mousse, shallots, and sherry. So tell us a bit about this. Little, as you mentioned, it's from the region that's close to France, or croissants, or something. As you mentioned, it's something that is done in different places, and also puff pastry is not unique and specific to any one nation. But yeah.
Sure. So I think you can tell the first one, aside from the croissants, very Spanish. Manchego cheese is very popular. You typically see it served with quince and other things. I think they have it on the menu here actually, but I haven't ordered it. I forget what they pair it with. It's usually with like I say, a fruit. Like I see quince a lot. I see different fruit jams. But here it's made into a sandwich, so it's the cheese, the ham. I think there was mustard on here too, if I recall. Again, obviously very French and Spanish. You can tell by the flavors. The second one here is the chicken liver mousse. Again, that's typically more of a French thing. There's shallots, and they're actually they were sautéed, if I recall, and there was like a sherry. They were cooked in like a sherry reduction. Sherry, of course, is a big Spanish wine, so that goes very well together. The mousse is just sort of spread across the inside the croissant. They don't have this on the menu currently. I was actually asking the guy there about it because this was really good. I tried these two versions at different times. When I first went a while back, then I came back sometime later on my own. I think I had the manchego and ham one first, and a while later I had this one with the chicken liver mousse. It's not in season. I think this was on the menu in winter, so I don't know maybe if they're going to bring it back winter or how that's going to work. They started to change the menu a little bit because, as you know, we're going into summer now. They've only changed one dish on the menu, but the guy was telling me pretty soon the menu is going to be way different. So that'll be interesting because I'm not going to say I'm bored with it, but it's like I'm in there enough that a lot of the things I've already tried. So they're going to finally tweak some things. Well, when we get into the scallop dish below, I'll point out one of the ones I had was the more recent one, which they changed. You can tell the vegetables change season by season. A lot of the other items stay, but then there's a few items like this that seem to be in season winter time, and the other time of the year you come in, they're not here. So.
Okay. And this mousse, is it? It's kind of like sour cream. The consistency, like what's the process of making this? It's not like pate, but maybe it's just with more. It's definitely more of a not fluid. What the term would use to this?
I don't know if cream cheese is a good comparison. I'm trying to think, like maybe more in that direction where you typically take the liver, usually cure it in different things, usually mix it up. Like I've seen people do it different ways. You can do a force meat through a Robocoup or through a meat grinder. There's different ways you can do it. I'm not sure what they do. And then if I remember correctly, yeah, then you cook it. I think there's different ways to cook it too. If it's like, I'm trying to think if they do like the water bath or what. I'm not sure. I never really made the liver mousse, but then it congeals enough so that it's spreadable. So that's how they spread it on this. Um, I saw this one at Dixon's Meat Market. That's a place I go to sometimes in Chelsea. They have it. It's actually in a jar. Like you put it in the jar, the fat will actually separate to the top, and the mousse is in the middle, and you just sort of scoop in and eat it that way. Um, I think it's similar. In that case, they make it similar to like a jam or something like it, like in a jar in hot water, and then it's sealed and everything, and then you once it's cooled down, you scrape it out and use it. I think that's probably a similar method here, but I'm not sure
But
exactly what they do.
is fully everything is fully at the same consistency. There's no like chunks or bits or anything.
Right, exactly. It's smooth. That's the thing. A mousse is smooth, whereas a pate, it's common. You actually have chunks of meat, like it is broken down. But a pate, it's common. You'll bite into chunks of meat, or they'll put vegetables and other things. The mousse is super smooth. Usually, they pass it through a fine mesh sieve, like a tammy. If you don't know, that looks like a drum almost, but it's a sieve. You press things through. Usually, you take a little scraper and press things through, so it's supposed to be very smooth. Whereas again, a pate, you expect it to be kind of chunky.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 So yeah, I can see like some different levels. Maybe just
Yeah.
I think of like maybe a dessert version when you have like a more sweeter croissant, or some of the croissants that have like some people might be like a sacrilege, like using like blueberries or like the way you do
Well,
muffins, like coconut with yeah, even coconut muffins. I haven't actually seen some coconut muffins yet, but if you make coconut cake, you probably make some coconut muffins easily. I'm trying to think of like maybe some like dessert version
Well,
of
so at Barbalud where I used to work, there was something on brunch called Viennoisois, which in French means Viennese, because the croissant was actually invented in Paris, but by Austrians. I don't know if you know that story. It's made after the crescent moon because it was celebrating victory over the Turks. That's why. And what it is they had different croissants on brunch. So there was like the plain one, there was one with chocolate, there were ones with different berries inside them, all that. But that was more of like a breakfast brunch thing. So I don't know if anyone serves them as dessert. I think it's more something you eat like early, kind of like morning, like early afternoon. I mean, you could do it as a dessert, but I haven't seen it, at least not in my experience.
yeah, because if you did this maybe with, for example, some kind of like crunchy cinnamon, well, cinnamon itself. I don't know how we'd be able to get. I'm trying to think like what kind of more dessert leaning thing can you get to
You could
be
do
like,
you could do a cinnamon sugar and maybe like put it on top and hit it with a blowtorch or something. So it's
yeah,
like because the sugar and the cinnamon, then the sugar melts a little bit, but then solidifies and it's crunchy. Do something like that, maybe.
yeah, and then you could use like more like a heavy cream to instead of the mousse, and then I don't
Yeah,
know, like yeah, and
you
then
could fool around, yeah.
so yeah, next one.
Sure.
Okay. So now we're on to croquetas of the day, and the first two. This one you won't be able to actually see the inside, but trust Stephen, they are two different. So the
Mm-hmm.
ones where there's two together, the first two are chicken and spring onion, and the last one is jamon. No, jamon is
Hamon.
hamon and
It's
pea.
yep.
Pea. Like when you say pea, it's like one pea, just like a pea.
So these change day by day, but as you can tell, it's basically whatever they have available. So when I was in yesterday, they actually had it was ham, but there was also some cheese thrown in. So these first ones, my guess is that chicken, spring onion, it's a springtime item, so they probably had some chicken. Like I mean, I don't know which part of the chicken I use, but my guess is they probably use the cheaper parts of the chicken that wouldn't be as nice to serve whole. So you cut them up, mix them in with the batter, and then you throw the spring onions in as well. Then you fry them. You do that because for croqueta, you can probably tell it's the Spanish version of croquette. It's just like a breaded fried ball. And then the last one is well then ham and peas. So you figure again ham cut up into pieces, peas as well. Again, springtime or it was springtime, so what they had left of peas. Then this other one I had, they said it was just ham, but there was cheese in it too. I could tell. So my guess is again they probably threw a little bit of cheese in just to use it. Maybe there was some cheese like scraps or something that they wanted to use up. It's a good way to sort of I'm not going to say use waste. I mean, obviously it's good stuff, but it's a creative way to use up trimmings and things that you wouldn't typically you wouldn't want to put on a plate because they wouldn't look too nice. Like if you're cooking for yourself at home, fine, but you wouldn't want to serve people scraps of stuff on a plate. So you just find ways to cut it up, sort of throw it into something and make something nicer out of it. So,
Yeah, no, it's just whole hog. It's
yeah.
holistic. Let's say call it holistic cooking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is one thing I was just thinking about. Depending on where you live, of course, there could be some places where they have the process of processing foods and manufacturing foods, getting foods prepped to a certain industrial level where the cost benefit analysis changes. But here in Kenya, it's a common thing. It's really easy to find chickens. You can get live chickens, and there's just markets all over the place where you can actually just go in and they just slaughter the chicken there, or you can buy the live chicken, bring it to your home, and slaughter it where you have. Or pretty much supermarkets and all those, you'll get the whole things, butcher shops and things like that. It's to the point where if you buy prepackaged chicken breasts, like just getting like maybe like say like 500 grams of chicken breasts just prepackaged already, it's something like 600 shillings. It could be around that much. But getting the entire chicken yourself is also around 600 chicken. 600, sorry, 600, 600 chickens, 600 shillings. And then if you get like the live chicken, the fluctuates could even be lower than that. Live chicken itself could then be now down to 500, 450 if you're getting the live chicken. That's just one of the few things where it's like, hey, if you can cook, like there's no need to get a completely full chicken breast and then chop it up and then put it in a croqueta like this, where, as Stephen is showing, is not there. And Stephen is taking these pictures of some time. We'll get to the point where we'll start getting more into this, where both of us will start, I'll start cataloging my food more. We'll get Stephen to do that, where maybe he'll, in this one, he'll be able to like cut it open or take a bite and show you the insides. People like those kind of things, right? You guys can tell us what you like, guys, gals, and everything else in between. Tell us what you like with like the videos. We're testing this out with the images on the side, so this one might be
one thing that just occurred to me, Silas, too. I could even do a video of like myself, like it comes out, then I cut it open and sort of like show the inside. I could do something like that.
That's what I was doing. I showed you to do like a small, like a short video, maybe do like a little turnaround thing. I mean, let's buy into the bit. Let's be those weird foodie people that you look at, like a person's taking a photograph or whatever. For me personally, why I don't do that is because sometimes the food comes out and like want to eat it warm, and just the process of enjoying the food. So I might get into a thing when I'm doing that. I might do something where like the first time I go to the restaurant, I'll get it, and then I have an excuse to go back a second time where I actually record the stuff.
Well, I was gonna say with the croquette, it's funny because you can tell they make them fresh because they come out, they're super hot. So you need a sec for it to cool off, so that actually kind of works, because it's one of those things I grab and I can tell how hot it is. So it's like it's better to let it sit, and I could even just cut it open, record it. Then it's like it sits for a little bit, then I can eat it. It's not, if you put it in your mouth right away, it's like
Yeah, we can also make this a social thing where when you go out, when you go with people, so someone records you when you're like cutting open your food, and then you record them when they're cutting open their dish, and that way both of you can fully enjoy the thing without having to hold a camera while doing it. So that's just something in mind. But just with just a simple thing like that, if you get the point where you just know some knowledge about preparing food, about cooking food, you can get to the situation where you say, okay, instead of doing this, instead of buying, let's say you have a lot of meals, or you're making a fettuccine alfredo or something like that with chicken, which prefers having like the chicken breast type cuts of the meat. Although in America, you can also get something like deboned chicken thighs and chicken legs, which are, I think that food to me is a lot more tasty, flavorful part of the chicken, which is a rather bland animal when it comes to the actual things, right? A lot of things taste like chicken because chicken is rather bland. But you can have something like that. You get a situation where after some time, this is how people say, oh, I can't afford to eat a certain way. It's like, first of all, like health-wise, you actually can't afford, it's a lot more expensive to not spend a little extra more time and money on certain food by having certain processed things and missing out on certain nutrients and things like that really affect your health in the long run. But something like this in your wallet, you get a situation where you might have a few dishes. Most of your dishes have the chicken breast, but you just buy the full chicken. Even if you're not breaking it down and eating it the whole time, you're not having the wings at all times. But yeah, you just cut off the wings after making 3 different purchases like that over maybe 2 weeks. Then you have enough wings for like a wing meal. But during that time, you've also had the neck, you've also had the back, you've also had like little winglet parts, the top part, which is like it's the hand equivalent of the chicken. You have those different parts. You can get those. You can make a stew. You can make some hearty like stock and things like this. And things like the stew, things like the stocks, those kind of things on the side, they're not things that you have to sit down there and watch and spend. Like if you're making lasagna, you're going to be spending a good 2-3 hours in the kitchen to actually prep this. But if you're having something like these things on the side, you just boil that, you leave that going while you're doing other things. You just come in and check. You could be making your meal for the day, but you have those multiple countertop type of things, and you just have a different saucepan going on with the chicken soup and the chicken stock that you're going to make to have for a much longer time. So just getting to be aware of some of these things, having this whole hog type of food, type of cooking, because a lot of the cuisines that you consider to be so upper class, so amazing that you can't afford to eat, were actually developed by people who are trying to make the most out of the so-called scraps of the food that you don't consider to be worth even buying anymore now that there's this huge industrial food complex serving you. So there's some weird, odd relationship that people have with like the foods that they actually eat in that situation.
I try to explain this to my mother. I'm like, it used to be commonplace. You ate all these organs, you had to use the whole animal. It's just we produce so much food in America that we can afford to throw out a lot of it. But it's a luxury to get to that point. That wasn't always
Yeah.
the case. But then you had people like Mario Batali and other people started putting organ meats on the menu, and because they had so much clout, people were like, okay, we'll trust them. Hey, these are pretty good. Well, but then people were like, hey, okay, they got some livers, they got some sweetbreads. Hey, these are pretty good. And then they started bringing some of that stuff back. And then you have these old school French places that have served them for decades. But then, like some of the, I guess, new American places have tried to find ways to bring them back, but do a more creative spin. Because then people try them, they're like, hey, this is actually pretty good. And like a chef in school said too, that really shows your skill as a chef because it's like anyone can make lobster taste good, anyone can make filet mignon taste good, but can you make chicken livers taste good? Things like that. Like that takes real skill. That shows where the real craftsmanship really is. Yeah.
Yeah, most
Yeah.
definitely. So yeah, definitely get out there. Try to get outside of your main your main like diet, your main things that you think this is a thing that I eat, this is a thing I would never eat. Like I know I just mentioned like things like olives. I do eat them, but I just don't like them, so I just avoid them. But that's different than being like this is something I would never ever eat. If I was let's not get into the whole starving thing. If you're starving, you eat a lot of things. Even I'm even more open minded to things like insects. But as I might have mentioned in this series, but in the from the ancestral lands, the Luya land places, this like these mushrooms that I'd mentioned before, these traditional mushrooms that grow in the area. I'm still trying to find the actual name of the specific strain of mushrooms that it is, but they normally dried up and served in certain and produced in a certain way and stored in that way. But then we make this kind of thick sauce with it, and then we use tiswa is like the termites that you see some things from different places in Africa and safaris have those big, huge, massive termite hills that are just
Ah,
huge. So those termites in rainy season, it rains a lot because Western Kenya, where the tribe that I'm part of, is from, is by Lake Victoria. So there's a lot of rainy area there. And during the rain times when there's lights, these termites just come out in flocks. And even the cities and places like this, like if you have your lights on here, I have my lights on here, the windows there, and you'll just see them come and just on the window. And they have these short kind of cycles where they come out and that they have the wings, and then the wings fall off normally, and then they just wander around after it rains. But anyway, so we collect those, and then you dry them as well. And then after that, you make the sauce and you put the termites in with the mushrooms. It's just a very delectable meal. And currently, I think in the United States of America, there was a small little push to kind of get people eating the cicadas during
ugh.
cicada. How
I
do you
say cicada. I guess maybe it depends on the
cicadas?
region.
And you have that in there. And so with insects, some cultures are still a lot more open on eating insects. As an argument has been made that I kind of believe, like seafood, shellfish are technically insects of the sea, and
Mhm.
people are open to that. And as was mentioned, lobster used to be something that was just people used to just eat. Like it used to be a simple thing. But then now that it's actually more common, there's actually an argument that the common lobster now actually eats a worse diet than the lobster in the past. So those are the kind of things that go back and forth. But once upon a time, lobster wasn't something that was eaten. And do imagine in the future, people will be a lot more open to eating insects. There's some pushback towards that because I also have mistrust for the certain locations and people that are pushing this kind of thing, World Economic
Mhm.
Forum type of people. I'm like,
Yeah.
whenever you say something, it's just what I do. If I'm doing that thing, I'm like, maybe I should stop doing that thing.
Yeah.
Just on principle. But yeah, I think there will be something opening up with that. And something like croquettes might be a way that might be more palatable to people to get enter and accept that because in this sense of that's a little thing with the food in there. I don't have to actually see or keep that in mind, but I can still get the flavor and the taste and then slowly open up into that. So I don't know. That could be something that
I forget if I mentioned it last time. We can do a future video on it, but there's that place, the Black Ant, where they have bugs on some of their food. Like they have a guacamole with black ants on it. They have the ice cream with chapulín, the grasshoppers. I had that. They had a dish I wanted to try. It was roasted bone marrow with uni, that sea urchin, and actually whole grasshoppers on top. I wanted to try it, but it was off the menu when I came. So there are places that do things like this, and I mean the Black Ant's still around. They're still doing well. So they don't just serve stuff like that, but they do have stuff that's kind of out there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Actually, for the time being, Stephen is in New York. We might move because it's New York.
uh,
Stephen is Stephen, and right now I'm in Nairobi, Kenya, and might move because it's Nairobi, and Cyrus is Cyrus. But we've been talking about doing more with this. We're both very interested in food. It will have some plans with some thoughts of things coming out where we might do like some traveling around and and sampling this and then talking about the other topics and things that we discuss, because we want to make it more than just the food itself. But for now, if there's certain restaurants that you're familiar of in New York that you think Stephen might enjoy, or you're personally interested in, that you think you'd like to see him go to, I think he'd be open to taking suggestions for that. If you've been in Nairobi and you've gone to some places, or you've seen some things, or if you're more interested in me going out doing that. For me, I'm personally more, I cook a lot more. I have access to the kitchen at this time being. Stephen, once that changes, part of the possibility of moving, it could be getting that and cooking more. But if you have any places in Nairobi, if you're more interested, if you want me to find certain foods and things like that in that sense, let us know in the comment section or send us an email. I'll create an email specifically for this. I think there might be there's definitely a website already. We'll announce that in a couple of next ones, and then we might have separate locations where this specific kind of thing can be more of a communal type of thing, and maybe we can see what other people have to say about that. That's just things coming in the works.
Yep. But for now, back to Huertas.
Okay, yes, back to Huertas now. So the next one, here I have seared foie gras on toast, and the first is with vermouth, gelée. Was it gelée or gelée?
Gelée. Sorry, I didn't do the accent. The aigu with gelée.
And the second is with strawberry rhubarb puree. Sounds great. Sounds like an interesting thing. Yeah.
So anyone who knows me knows that foie gras is one of my favorite foods. I like what our friend Rose said to me one day. She goes, "You are your foie gras," implying because I drink a lot and eat this. So it's a liver. Yeah, definitely. It's a liver of a force-fed duck or goose. Obviously there's some controversy with the whole animal rights thing. I think it's going to be. They're talking about it being illegal in New York next year. It's still on a lot of menus, so I guess people are trying to serve it while they can. I'm wondering if it's going to be overturned, though, because that's what happened in Chicago, where the law was that you couldn't sell it. So what people did was they included it on tasting menus, but they technically gave it away. So that was the loophole. And after a while, they realized like people were doing things like that, so they couldn't enforce it. Yeah, because it's one of those things like people want it, people are going to pay for it, they can make money. It's like, I mean, if a few people
underground restaurants, like little alleyway restaurants to go and get foie gras. You can get the meal here, or I can send you over there and you can get it with foie gras.
But it's like it's profitable for the business versus a few people get upset. It's like, whatever. So this first one was with vermouth gelée. For those who don't know, vermouth is a fortified wine. I've actually come to appreciate vermouth because of this restaurant. They actually make their own vermouth in-house, which is pretty cool. It actually started in Italy, in Turin. I think it was the 18th century. Of course, it went to Spain and other places. It's kind of interesting because I thought of vermouth as like just kind of like a mixing alcohol. And I said to my old boss, who is Spanish, I was like, "Oh, you drink vermouth?" And he got offended by that. He was like, "Oh, I'll give you some vermouth. It's good stuff." And I've actually come to appreciate it. But again, it's like, I guess the ones that they mix into drinks are like the cheaper variety. It's kind of like people who work with cooking wine. It's just like, it's very cheap. It's not that good. But like the stuff that they make themselves is nice because you steep wine with herbs and other things and then serve it. So there's a lot more depth. There's different flavors going on. So my sense for the gelée, what they do is they probably cook it on a stove. They probably use an agar-agar, another thickener, or they use a little bit of gelatin. That'd be my guess. I didn't ask, but that's typically what you do. You add a little bit so it thickens, so it's spreadable. Almost, I don't know if jam is the best comparison, but it's kind of more in that direction. Like it doesn't get thick like Jell-O. And then the strawberry rhubarb puree, I think that's self-evident. That's been on the menu because of the season recently. They said it's going to change soon. I'll be curious to see what they do next. I was getting foie gras regularly, but I got kind of tired of it because it's the same condiment. It was funny, not yesterday, but the time I went before that, they sent me a piece of foie gras complimentary, and then they accidentally sent me another one, and they were like, "Oh, well, I'll have it anyway." I was like, "All right." It's really a good deal though. I mean, it's typically $7 a piece. I mean, it's not big, it's like that, but for foie gras, and then on happy hour it's half off, like I say, so it's like $3. So $3 for a slice of foie gras is like practically free. I mean, foie gras is like 80 plus a pound or something last I checked. So no.
$3 for a slice of tortured geese is this thing.
Goose liver.
Even I can confirm to dislike animals. There is something about that. Now, on something like foie gras, I would say there was a certain process in here that with these objections, I can empathize a bit, but the aspect for me, I like human animals the most out of all the animals on Earth. Out of all the Earthlings, I prefer human animals, even random human animals, over most animals. I guess it's a difference when you actually have pets. And I just posted something on my blog. And I was seeing something. I was watching these channels where it's now just somebody prepping food. It was different like seafoods and things like that. It was like the different kind of things, and it was Asian based. And then they went to one where there's this Korean street food octopus type of thing, and like the guy was showing this huge tub of octopi, and he was kind of holding them up, and then one of them like squirted on him, and like he's like laughing around, like then he throws them, like he pulls it out, throws it on the ground. He was showing that okay, we don't sell the ones with thin hoods, and then he was putting his finger in the hood, and then he was going out, and like one of them kind of you could see was kind of going through, and there was like a little membrane on top, and the people in the comment sections like, oh, I feel bad, he's treating like the smartest animal in the world, one of the smartest animals in the world like this, like he's just laughing and he's like throwing it on the ground, like oh, I bet it's actually street food because like they just do it on the fishmonger's place, and it's the floor and they're wearing the boots, so they're on the floor and they're butchering the animal and cutting it open, and dividing the plates up, and they splashing a whole bunch of water, and like oh, it's so unsanitary. And to me, that was just more reminders of how removed people are from the whole process of life and death. You can only say some of those things if you've been somebody who most of the food you get is just this prepackaged thing. You don't understand the history of it. You don't understand the process of making of it. Because sure, yes, I understand with that animal. There are some things, but we don't know what the nerve endings are. We don't know what the actual treatment. There might be more sanitary ways to do this. It might be better, more like humane. But even when you use the word humane, you're referring to standards based off of humans, but people project these on other animals, and I'm not sure how helpful that is, but I do think it's kind of unrealistic and a sign of privilege of living in a life that is actually so humane, so humanly, artificially involved that you are completely entirely divorced from the process of getting certain resources means ending the lives of other resources, be they plants or animals. There's a process that goes into that. When you butcher the animal, like I just know the person has never actually seen an animal being butchered, never probably done it themselves. Because does it really matter if you cut the neck of the chicken on a clean, sanitary floor? It's not exactly like you're doing surgery on this animal to maintain its life. This is an animal that has been caught in order that it's going to actually be killed. And it's a few steps away from being killed anyway. So if it's killed in that way, what's the real difference from doing it? If it's the floor that has water on it, what's the difference with a countertop that doesn't have water on it? When it really comes down to it, it's lived on the ocean floor. Is the ocean floor dirty? So these kind of things are just it's a bit frustrating. It's different if this is an animal that's somebody's pet, somebody's animal just existing out there in the wild, living its life. But when it comes to the point when you're dealing with an animal that's actually either caught or raised in order to be killed, it is a rather privileged position to have that point where you can actually object to treatments of this animal like seconds before it's actually like killed to be eaten, not even by you, but by other people. It's different if you're like, I'm not going to go to a restaurant if they do this to the animal right before it's killed, versus this is like some random person in some random place, some random animal I'll never eat, and people are still objecting. I don't know. It's something that just came to mind as we talked about foie gras that just it's one of these random things that kind of just gets to me about certain things. I don't know. So with foie gras, sorry, one question. With foie gras, is there a way to get this effect of the animal without having that force feeding process?
So one, they used to use a metal tube. Now they use a plastic tube. Not that that's that much better. That's one thing. They've talked about ways. I'm trying to remember if there's something they put in the food to get the animal to overeat on its own, but it still is kind of messed up because the liver still fattens and gets way down. If you think about it, like a goose liver is like this, but the foie is like that. So it's definitely not the most like
What's the
kindest.
size difference actually?
What's it?
How much bigger does the foie gras one
Oh,
become?
it gets a lot bigger because I'm trying to think like a goose liver is probably
Four
like
or five times?
it's probably like this or something, and then the foie is like, it's a few times. Yeah.
It's 4 or 5 times big?
Yeah, at least.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
and this is another thing. Many people will I bet there's a if you did a Venn diagram, there's a lot of crossover between people that would object to the treatment of foie gras, but then say you can't really fat shame. You can't body shame people. You can't like obesity is not really health at every size. Like no, people object that this animal is getting fattened and it's bad for the animal. But when humans get fattened, they're like,
Yeah.
it's just health at every size. So like, what does it come down to this? And can we figure out a way to do that? Can you figure out to get the way humans? Actually, this is not a good thing to say because most of the humans who actually do end up being obese have actual abuse. It's normally invariably it has to do. There's a small percentage that have thyroid issues, it's like 1%, and then the
Yeah.
majority of them there's normally something to do with childhood. adverse childhoods or certain depression, certain issues in their current life that they can't deal with, and then obesity comes into that. So yeah, it was good to make like a small joke, like, can we figure out a way to get the geese to like obese themselves up like humans are doing? But that would probably involve adverse childhoods with animals. But then most other animals, in a sense, don't have the ability and knowledge to understand the benefits of peaceful parenting. And in their own animal type of societies, they have probably there's no really like peaceful parenting for animals because they have developed a certain animal style of parenting where even within that, I think there would probably be a spectrum where certain animals are more harmful to their offspring and then their offspring don't have as good as the results. So yeah, that was.
I feel like that's going to be your next video, Silas. You're probably going to do a video talking about this stuff.
Oh, like, so some of the other videos, I guess this might break this out to a separate channel because I think this is end up being more of a conversation thing. And I think I prefer the whole conversations that we've been having with Stephen rather than making the videos or solo videos I've done. I have a few solo videos in mind, but I've been posting a lot more in the blog and things like that. But yeah, we'll figure this out. This will be growing as it is. But yeah, sure. I don't know, the foie gras thing. I'm not sure where I stand on it. Another related one is like veal.
Oh, I was going to actually, I was going to bring up something about that I told my local bartender the other day. I remember learning a few years ago that the veal industry was actually lobbying to keep foie gras around because they know with foie gras gone, everything's going to be focused on them. So like foie gras is kind of the buffer zone for them.
That does make sense. Yeah, that is, at least you don't fatten the animal up. But then there's also the whole like capon thing where you actually like neuter the animals and then it fattens the animal up. So do you know foie gras are caponized? Are they castrated as well?
That's a good question actually, because you can also get the magret, which is it's the duck breast from the foie gras duck, so it has a higher fat content. And there's a Hudson Valley foie gras farm. It's actually not too far from where I grew up. It's opposite side of the river, and you got to drive a bit, but it's not that far. But they're very big on using the whole animal, as we say. Like they sell the feathers for down, they use the bones for stock. You can buy the magret, you can buy some of the other organs. Of course you can use the duck is a lot fatter, so you can get the duck fat, you can render that down. So things like that. I don't know if they castrate the duck. I never really asked or looked into that though.
Okay, and you say foie gras is duck. There's also goose foie gras, right?
Yeah. Foie gras just means liver fat, literally translated. We'd say fat liver, but it's either animal.
And I wonder, can you do animal? Can you do like hooved animal? Can you do like pig foie gras, like cow foie gras?
So somebody was saying to me they want to try bald eagle foie gras.
Yeah, so it's interesting how these things happen because even as you mentioned something like the agar earlier, I looked it up to find out what it is. It's something that was made from that agar may have been discovered in Japan in 1658 by Mino Tarozaemon, an innkeeper in Fushimi-ku, Kyoto, who, according to legend, was said to have discarded surplus seafood soup, tokoroten, and noticed that it gelled after a winter night's freezing. Over the following centuries, agar became a common gelling agent in several Southeast Asian cuisines. So it's actually something that comes from algae. It's actually obtained from red algae. It's a jelly-like substance. So I don't know how many people knew that, but many cuisines and many foods that you are eating include this agar. And as you had mentioned, some of these things just come by between doing this whole. Somebody like you just throwing the food out and then he just observed it and he found that. And then now it's a staple in many kind of cuisines and many kind of dishes. It's a core part of it. And like with foie gras, who was the first person to fatten up a duck?
Well, that's actually been debated. Some people say it was the Egyptians. Some people say that when the Israelites were in Egypt, they did it. Some people said that the Romans learned it from somebody that they had ruled. I think there's a lot of debate about where it really came from.
Yeah, because was it more like, was it an actual livestock thing, or was it like somebody? Because I was thinking also before with most people who have objections to something like the way that octopus was being treated, they mostly relate with animals as pets, because that's when they actually deal with pets. And the actual wild animals they see are like squirrels or pigeons, things that are relatively harmless. They don't actually go in the wild and see an actual bison in the wild. The thing's he's a terrifying creature. It's massive. They don't go out and see like meese. Is it mooses or meese? It should be meese.
Well, meeses can be slang for plural mice, but like people say meeses.
Like I'm talking about the moose, like the animal. It's not even just like not even when it comes down to like small things, like squirrels have a rather symbiotic relationship. It's gotten to the point where they don't even have like the pest local animals like rats and mouse and mice and like in their homes, which are terrorizing people. Like right now in Australia, because it's just Australia, they had this whole massive time. It's like rats and things and mice were just like it's a plague of them moving around Australia for some time being, just going into like people's like homes and warehouses and things, eating everything up. They don't have that kind of situation where they have that dealing with nature. They're so divorced from nature, where all the animals they have are these pets that are fattened up and very pleasant, and they don't have that realization that no, animals in the wild, like if an octopus might be like a peak predator, it might be an apex predator in its environment, but there's almost no way that humans kill animals on basic that is really less horrific and painful than they would be killed in the wild. Like the bear is not like, let's make sure the deer is dead first. It's like, no, it's just you're alive.
Yeah.
I even saw this random video of like a deer killing an eagle that had swooped down to try and get, it was thinking it was trying to get a rabbit, but because the deer had its fawn somewhere by, thought the fawn was in danger, and just started just like slamming on it. But yeah, anyway, so that was a little aside about foie gras. Let us know in the comment section what do you know about foie gras. What is your personal take on it? Did you taste it before you know what it was? Does that change your opinion on it? And yeah, also look and see if there are ways to get the goose to fatten up this way without. There's got to be some ways. There's probably some ways to put certain foods in the food, but regardless, it's harmful. Regardless, people will admit it's harmful. Obesity is not a positive thing, especially to target a specific. Yeah, that's another thing. Does the rest of the animal get super fatty too?
It does. It does get fatter. Like I say, that's why the duck breast, they sell them as a magret, because it's a foie gras duck breast. So it's the duck itself. And there's also a certain there's also, I should point out here, they typically do a certain species of duck. It's called a moulard duck, which is actually a cross between a Muscovy and a Peking duck. So it's kind of, think of like a mule or some other crossbreed. Like the animal itself is sterile because, it's a hybrid, which doesn't occur in nature, so it can't reproduce. But I guess that combination of duck has the right fat content. So
yeah, I've seen the photos they have up are not good. Yeah.
No.
Steven, you're a horrible human being. I think I'm done with this series. I'm not doing it anymore. But yeah.
Well, as an aside, I also find that foie gras is one of those things people either love or hate. It's either like me, it's one of their favorites, or they're like, this is not for me at all. But I don't know. I feel like it's one of those love or hate things depending on the person.
Yeah. But you like it, but you could. I mean, if you never had foie gras again, you wouldn't be like the end of the world. So I'm not like.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that was it. And now that you know Steven's a horrible person, let's go on to the next eight. Okay, so this one is the Basque Dog, which is chistorra sausage, piquillo, mostarda, and aioli.
Sure. So I should point out here, this is actually sausage from the Basque region. In the Basque dialect, it doesn't start with the CH. It's actually TX. I don't know if you're familiar with their dialect of Spanish at all, but typically words that start with CH are TX instead, but it's still pronounced ch. So like there's another Basque restaurant called Chiquito, but it's spelled like TXIKITO or something, but it's still pronounced Chiquito. Like the pronunciation is the same, but the spelling's different. I guess region by region, that's the language is the same. I think the dialect there might be some different words, but there's a lot of words that are pronounced the same that are spelled differently. So Piquillo mostarda, so it's Piquillo, it's those were the peppers that I had above. You see red and yellow ones here. It's cooked with mustard seeds, so it's like it's not a spread. It's not like it's the peppers are simmered, but then they throw the mustard seeds in and other things, so it breaks down a little, so there's some flavor. The aioli, it's basically mayo, but it's made with the garlic typically. And then the sausage itself, it's a sausage. It's a pork sausage. It's usually lightly smoked. There's some paprika in there as well. People have kind of compared it to chorizo a little bit. You can probably tell by the name, it's like their play on a hot dog. I mean, it's a lot better in my opinion, but it's kind of a creative take on a hot dog. This is one of those things I've had a few times as well when I go in.
Yeah, this looks a bit like an interesting bun. Like just from the look of the bun, it looks more like a sweeter bun. Like it looks like something like a potato-based bun and things, just because of that little shelf at the bottom. I don't know what you necessarily call it, but it doesn't like your typical more cylindrical buns. But yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
so you get like the smokiness of the sausage, a little bit of garlic and aioli, a little bit of mustard, the peppers like a slight, the peppers are sweeter with like a slight bit of spice, and the potato bun, pretty nice. Yeah.
Yeah, looks good. And
Yeah.
this, as you mentioned, this was like pork-based sausage, or did you mention
Yeah.
that? Okay,
Yeah, it's
pork.
pork and lightly smoked. Yep.
Okay, good, good. Yeah, just is this is one of the New York things. I mean, I think I went to a few vendors, or maybe one vendor, the whole like street hot dog type of thing. It's like, oh, it's a New York hot dog type of thing.
Uh,
There's the kind of thing where I'm just like, one of those kind of dishes. I think I had this experience as well. I went to the Penn Relays in Philadelphia and actually finally got like an actual Philadelphia Philly cheesesteak. And it was just like, meh. It's the same thing with hot dogs. Hot dogs are hot dogs mostly. This meh. When it comes out to hot dog, it's like there's so many better ways to do it than just like, oh, hot dog, mustard, the yellow French mustard and Heinz tomato ketchup. Like it's one of the weird things that people like. It's a New York hot dog type of thing. I'm like, are you guys really trying to big up a hot dog? Like, are you really trying to make that a thing? Like, make something you're famous for? Like, no, come on, do better, because there's so many different ways you can do it. With the idea of a hot dog is some kind of bun thing, bracing some meat with some things on it. This is one of the few foods. This is one of those foods where I think anybody can pretty much figure out how to make, that you can do so many different wondrous things with it, and don't just keep it with just a plain, like, just even a simple thing like, instead of just boiling the wiener or the whatever you're going to put in, smoke it, do something else, fry it, bake it, do something else instead of just basic ketchup and mustard. Use something else. Maybe just get like some soy sauce, get some jam, mix something in there, put a bit of peppers in there, some herbs, and then you have a different kind of flavor on it. And then you just try something. This is something that I think is an easy way. For me, one of my favorite ones to do is use the Boer's sausage. I normally do like you can fry it a bit with that kind of situation in that place and whatnot. And then do like some honey mustard, which is just honey and whatever kind of mustard that you want with it. And then I do this thing where it's this regular thing here, kachumbari, where instead of using actual tomato ketchup, it's just kachumbari. The basic kachumbari is normally just onions and tomatoes, and you sprinkle some lemons and some cilantro, some kind of herb minter. That's the basic of it. And I just chop that up into small diced pieces, and you put that together. And that's just that's my normally basic go-to different take on hot dogs. And it's just, there's ways you can do it. This is one of the meals that I think, if you just have basic knowledge, if you're just basically aware and can make you around the kitchen, you can really do a lot of different things with the whole idea of a hot dog.
Well, there was also this place. I don't know if you ever went there. It's called Criff Dogs. It's on St. Mark's, and they have like a BLT dog. There's like a bacon wrap dog with the lettuce, tomato, and stuff. There's one with coleslaw and jalapenos on it. There's things like that. There's an everything dog I'm looking at the menu with actually cream cheese, scallions, everything bagel seasoning. They have some creative stuff like that. And it's one of those places that's open late, like a lot of industry restaurant people go there. I also found out recently that there's actually a speakeasy hidden in there as well. You can go into the entrance is hidden in there. Well, because one of my friends was telling me about, he took a woman on a date and he brought her there and she flipped out because she's like, you're taking me on a, like, I guess he had her dress up nice and it's like, you're taking me to Criff's Dogs, but apparently I guess there's like a nicer speakeasy hidden inside. So he like got her to go in and it was in the place. It was funny. But things like that though, I mean, you can do a lot with hot dogs, as you're saying. I mean, same with BLT. I mean, you can do different bread, you can do heirloom tomatoes, you can do different spread, you could do different cured meats. Like, it doesn't have to be the boring, like, okay, we've had this a million times.
Yeah. All right. So we're halfway through the pages you have here on the document. We're looking through the things, and we're already 100, already an hour and 43 into the actual recording. So maybe we can continue recording now, but maybe we'll probably do a cutoff thing where this will be the first part.
That's fine.